While economic globalization has, in fact, reduced the amount of poverty in the world, it has not eliminated disparity. Disparity is a difference in equality, whereas diversity is a difference in variety. In a previous video, we discussed how the WTO, IMF, and World Bank are organizations that want to encourage deregulations, which can impact the environment. But it also impacts people because reducing regulations means there's less government protection for those workers. And by demanding more right-wing policies in the countries that are needing international loans, it means that the social programs set up to reduce disparity get dismantled. That's the term austerity. An example of a country adopting more right-wing policies is China. While it claims to be a communist or socialist country, its economy is actually quite right-wing. Under Deng Xiaoping, the country set up small zones of capitalism and saw how economically successful it was. So capitalist freedoms were established throughout the country. But this led to a major decrease in the social safety net like healthcare, because government agencies were privatized, and in the last decade we've seen a major increase in pollution due to this capitalism. And transnational corporations love countries with limited worker regulations and low taxes because that makes the production of their goods cheaper. This is why so many of our goods are made overseas. You might have noticed that a lot of your clothing is being made in several different Asian countries. This is because a transnational clothing corporation will outsource the work to a private contractor that offers the lowest bid for the contract to make those clothes. Some of those private companies that contract out the work will make several different clothing brands all in the same factory. And these factories can be huge with thousands of people working in them. Factories can be like a small city with everything you need within the wall of the compound. Many of the workers are young people coming from rural areas because there's limited job opportunities on the farm, so they're housed at the factory in huge dorms. Sounds like a nice perk that the factory offers, but in reality what it often does is it control every aspect of the workers' lives because they live, shop, and work all in the same massive compound. And the conditions in many of these factories would be illegal in Canada. In fact, it can sometimes be defined as slavery. We call these factories sweatshops because employees are worked so hard in often hot and cramped conditions. On top of the poor working conditions is the pay, which is often just enough to survive, which is why we get our stuff so cheaply. Children and women are impacted the most by sweatshops as they often have the least amount of power in their society and are easier to take advantage of. We had these types of conditions during our Industrial Revolution, but over time people demanded the government get involved to do something about it. Supporters of socialism convinced governments in Western countries to pass laws to ensure safe working conditions, fair pay, limits to working hours, and limits to child labor. But in developing countries, they're just going through their Industrial Revolution. Wait a second, though. Aren't we the people who are benefiting from the products being made in these conditions? So shouldn't we be doing more to demand that workers in other countries are being treated fairly? Some would argue no. It's the responsibility of the people in that country to make the demands on their government. But others point out that most of the workers in the factories are very poor and don't have the political power that the transnational corporations have over the government. If we demanded that our transnational corporations did more to ensure fair working conditions in other countries, it would happen. It has. Most major transnational corporations now have whole departments that monitor the contracted factories to ensure that there are protections for the workers, because they know if they're found out to be using sweatshops, people in the developed countries will boycott them. There's online resources that you can access to help you make more informed purchases to avoid using sweatshops. There's also something called the brain drain, which refers to the phenomenon when better educated citizens move to other countries because their employment opportunities are better. This means that the country that invested in the education of an individual doesn't get the benefits of that investment. Here in Canada, we attract many qualified people from around the world to our workforce, but that means we've taken a qualified individual from another place, which then can make it more difficult for that country to develop a sustainable economy. Remember that the knowledge economy, where information is more valuable than goods, is a fact of life in our modern society, which means that the brain drain can have very serious consequences. Because of economic globalization, transnational corporations can relocate their head office in order to avoid paying taxes. So a successful Canadian company will move their headquarters to a country that has low corporate taxes, saving them millions of dollars. But that then means that the Canadian government is missing out on those funds. And often that head office relocation is really just a small office with a secretary who answers the phone, which then can be redirected overseas to the real headquarters. Often very powerful transnational corporations will demand that a developing nation give them favorable tax rates. Otherwise, the transnational will threaten to leave, taking vital jobs away. But at the same time, they're already taking away important tax funds that would be used to provide social services to the citizens. Many developed countries are now working to pass laws to prevent corporations from finding ways to not pay taxes through these relocation tactics. In a previous video, we talked about how Walmart can build a new commercial district in a community by building on the outskirts, and then other businesses will grow next to them. But that pulls commercial traffic away from the city center and expands our global footprint. Smaller businesses just can't compete with the low prices that major corporations demand from their suppliers, and they often go out of business. Even the suppliers themselves will do anything it takes to ensure their goods are on shelves in stores like Walmart, which sometimes means that they outsource their goods to be made in sweatshop factories. In the end, the biggest concern with economic globalization is the fact that many people in the world are benefiting from the misery of others. Sweatshops exist because there's a demand for products made faster and cheaper. Transnational corporations are often more concerned about their profits than the ethical treatment of their workers or protection of the environment.